So the IRS, with a hearing, I testified at House Ways and Means just a couple of weeks ago with the $600 reporting requirement from your bank to the IRS. They said, we'll move it to $10,000. Well, it's not really $10,000. It's $10,000 cumulatively, which meant they moved it from $600 to $800. With no probable cause, with no suspicion that you've done something wrong, they're just going to have to, banks are going to have to report this. By the way, the banking associations are not so happy about it, nor is our senior counsel for Global Affairs, Mike Pompeo. Because, Mike, you put out a tweet about yesterday. Joe Biden wants to weaponize the IRS in order to spy on your bank account, and that's precisely what he is trying to do.
It's great to be with you, Jay. You all at ACLJ have been all over this for years. I witnessed it personally when I was a member of Congress now 6-7 years ago. I watched the IRS go after conservative groups. This is more of the same. This is taking a tool of governmental power and using it in a way that is just immoral and deeply inconsistent with our Constitution. We got to stop what they're trying to do here. They'll be taking when you put those kinds of limits on, you're talking about 90+% of Americans who have bank accounts will be subject to IRS scrutiny in ways that will be looking for political activity, that will be looking for the kinds of things that we do in our family life. It's just so it's such a great risk to hand this to bureaucrats that we got to stop it, and now's the moment.
Yeah, Mike, we had on a caller just a few minutes ago from, I think it was Idaho, that is a rancher, and they said that, their fuel bill for their diesel trucks, that they have the 5 trucks on their ranch, was about $600 a month, a little bit more, and if you add the parts to it. So she said, so they're going to be looking at my fuel bills and my equipment expenditures for my ranch without audit authority. There's no reason for an audit here. We're just going to have them look at it. And you're right. We're going to, if this somehow gets through the Senate, which I can't imagine, but you never know, we are going to fight back aggressively because there's no constitutional protection for any American citizen here, Mike. I mean, nothing.
It's what you said in your opening comments. There's no prerequisite to this. This is ollie oxen free. This is just look if you have a few spare moments. They can stare at just about anyone. The fuel example is perfect. Someone who has a mortgage or a rental property, you can imagine millions of Americans who will be subject to a random IRS auditor saying, I think I'm going to go take a look at Smith or Jones or Sally today. And you can be sure that bureaucracy will be weaponized by an administration that is progressive and is looking for things that people are doing to protect their family, protect their religious freedom, and take their basic fundamental rights seriously.
I mean, I think about this case that was just handled where as soon as the Biden administration got in, they went right back to the targeting, putting in their determination letters. You believe the word of God is a factor in your ministry, in your organization. We think you're not entitled to tax exempt status. I mean, it's crazy. And no warrants. I mean, quickly, Andy, and then I want to pivot to Israel for a second here. But, Andy, the lack of problem, Mike just brought this up. He's right. No constitutional protections at all whatsoever in this.
No, there's none. You just go in and snoop and start looking. Look, the Constitution of the United States says that the people of the United States shall be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, and that the only time the government can stick their nose in our business is if there's probable cause to believe that criminal activity is afoot, and they go to a magistrate or a judicial officer and get a warrant. Okay, that's what the Constitution says. The Constitution has said that since 1789. Now, where in the world are we going here? We're giving the Internal Revenue Service, the scariest agency of the federal government, unfettered authority to aggregate everything you do in a year to $10,000 and then look at your lifestyle. Look where you donate, look where you give your money. That's not right.
No, we're not. We're gonna fight back on this. All right, Mike, you just came back from Israel, of course, as Secretary of State. You did what a tremendous job, and I just want to say that again. Thank you for all of us for the unbelievable changes that we saw in the Middle East. I was there for the moving of the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem. You just got back. You got a great piece up at ACLJ.org called Unwavering American Support for Israel is Key to Middle East Peace. You just got back, and a lot's changed since the last year with the new administration. What's your sense of how the Israelis are feeling about the relationship right now?
Yeah, so there are obviously outliers, but the vast majority of senior Israelis in government, out of government, just ordinary people are very worried about the relationship with the United States and Israel. They watched Democrats refuse to underwrite Iron Dome, and then they flipped the next day, right? So a simple task of helping protect ordinary Israeli citizens and, frankly, all the Americans who are in Israel every day protect themselves from Iranian rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. They watched, within a couple weeks of this administration taking office, they watched the rockets fire from the Gaza Strip, and the United States issued a press release saying, can't we all just get along, essentially. They ultimately came and said Israel had the right to protect itself, but it was tepid at best. Yep. They're very worried about this. And now they watched a special envoy, Rob Malley, sitting in Vienna talking about, well, maybe we just have to live with an Iranian leader, Ibrahim Raisi, a butcher. Maybe we just have to live with him having a nuclear weapon. And they grow concerned, and they recognize that they may well have to address these issues in a way that doesn't have the full-throated support of the United States. That's just dangerous for the region and for the world.
It really is. And, I know that the current finance minister, Avigdor Lieberman, Yvette is what they call him there, Lieberman has been concerned about Iran. He's been concerned about Iran since 2013. I remember having conversations with him about that. The Iranian threat, as you just mentioned, the kind of the acquiescence that the current administration is saying basically, well, they're going to probably get nuclear weapons and we're going to have to live with it. The truth of the matter is Israel cannot live with it.
No, Jay, Israel can't live with it. And it's not just the ability to use it, the risk that they'll actually use a nuclear weapon. It's the coercive power that comes alongside of that. And the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Egyptians, all of them would live under the threat of an Iranian regime that would say, if you don't do what we would like you to do, then we're going to use this tool. Now, it'll be unacceptable. The Israelis will be forced to take action, as they have done so many times before, to defend their right, the Jewish homeland. And they'll have the right to do that. They'll have the ability to effectuate it, I believe. But in the end, if they had American support, we could protect them from having to make those very difficult decisions and risk a real big conflict in the Middle East. America's relationship with Israel and the Abraham Accords combined isolated Iran and made the world more peaceful and more prosperous. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and I really appreciated your efforts on that, and I was thrilled with that. I was there when the Golan Heights Declaration was signed by President Trump, and it was an unbelievable day. Let me say this to our video team. If you could find the statement from John Kerry, where he talked about Israel had to make a choice. They can't be both a Jewish state and a democratic state. I want to play that for our audience in a moment here. Will let me know when we have it. But, you just were over there, and I go there a lot. We have an office in Jerusalem. And the fact of the matter is, this is the most democratic state in the region. It's the only place where you could practice religion freely. It's a civil society, liberal in the proper sense. It's the freedoms that are not recognized in most of the other neighbors, even though the neighbors are getting better. And I will say the neighbors are getting better as far on these issues. But people don't understand that Israel, the little land of Israel, is really the shining beacon of democracy.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. It has been since 1948. When I traveled this last trip, I had the chance to go visit Shiloh, a famous biblical site, the site of the first temple. It reminds you of the power of the tribes and the Jewish people and the great things that they have done for that region for an awfully long time, long predating the state of Israel in the late 1940s. They still are a pillar of democracy and peace, of religious freedom. They're the model that we can only hope expands in the region.
Let me play this bite from another Secretary of State, John Kerry, because I think this one sums up the drastic differences and why we've got to really keep our eye on the situation in the Middle East.
But here is a fundamental reality. If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. And it won't ever really be at peace.
This idea that you can't be a Jewish state and a democratic state is ridiculous. I mean, I find it personally, actually, Mike, offensive.
Yeah, it's offensive. It's anti-Semitic. It's so deeply troubling. This is the model that Secretary Kerry traveled the world carrying with him each place that he went. It has as the predicate, and you know the history here, Jay. It has as a predicate that Israel is an occupying force, right? That they are wrongly occupying this special holy land. That's just fundamentally untrue. We talked about that a great deal. He is deeply anti-Zionist. It gets at the core, and it's not far from the things that you would hear people like AOC say.
You're right.
Right? It's not far from what you would hear the Squad say about the Jewish people, and that they are somehow wrong to have their own rightful Jewish homeland in the state of Israel. We know that. We know the importance of Jerusalem. It's a city of peace. And then the Israelis have been in that place, in that special place in Israel. People have had the capacity to practice each and every faith. And that's important for people to keep in mind. They are not an occupying force in the state of Israel.
You're right. I appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for the update.